The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Bragg's training grounds as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her gear one final time. The other soldiers around her were doing the same, checking weapons, tightening straps, and mentally preparing for what everyone knew would be a challenging day. Today marked the beginning of the Advanced Marksmanship Selection Course, a program so demanding that most participants were handpicked from elite units across the military. Maria had earned her place here through years of consistent performance, but she knew that didn't guarantee respect from her peers. At 28, she had already served 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq, yet she still felt the weight of skeptical glances whenever she entered a room full of male soldiers. Her compact frame and quiet demeanor often led people to underestimate her capabilities, something she had grown accustomed to over her decade of service. The selection course attracted the military's best marksmen, soldiers who had proven themselves in combat and training exercises. Maria looked around at her competition. Seasoned snipers from the Marines, Army Rangers with multiple deployments, and Special Forces operators whose reputations preceded them. Each man carried himself with the confidence that came from years of successful missions and the respect of their units. Sergeant First Class Jake Morrison, a tall Texan with arms covered in military tattoos, was holding court near the equipment tables. His voice carried across the staging area as he regaled a small group with stories from his recent deployment to Syria. Maria had heard about Morrison's reputation as one of the finest shots in his Ranger battalion, and she could tell from the way others listened that his skills were well respected. "I'm telling you," Morrison was saying, his drawl thick with confidence, "when you're taking shots at 800 meters in urban terrain, there's no room for hesitation. Either you have the skills or you don't." His eyes swept across the group and landed briefly on Maria before moving on. She caught the slight dismissive look and felt her jaw tighten. Captain Rodriguez, the course instructor, emerged from the administration building carrying a clipboard and wearing the kind of expression that suggested he took his job very seriously. A combat veteran with 15 years of experience, Rodriguez had designed this course to push even the most experienced marksmen to their limits. His weathered face and steady gaze commanded immediate attention from everyone present. "Listen up," Rodriguez called out, his voice cutting through the morning chatter. "You're here because someone believes you have what it takes to join an elite group of marksmen. But believing and proving are 2 different things. Over the next 4 weeks, we'll test every aspect of your shooting ability, from basic marksmanship to complex scenarios you might encounter in the field." The instructor's eyes moved methodically across the assembled soldiers, taking measure of each participant. When his gaze reached Maria, she stood a little straighter, meeting his look with steady confidence. She had learned early in her career that showing weakness or uncertainty was a luxury she couldn't afford. "The course begins with weapons familiarization and selection," Rodriguez continued. "You'll have access to various rifle platforms, each with different characteristics and capabilities. Your choice of weapon will say a lot about your understanding of your own abilities, and the mission requirements will be testing." The group moved toward a series of tables laden with precision rifles. Maria recognized most of the weapons: the tried-and-true M24 sniper weapon system, the more modern M2010 enhanced sniper rifle, and several civilian precision rifles adapted for military use. Each weapon represented a different philosophy of long-range shooting, from the reliable workhorse designs to cutting-edge technology platforms. Morrison immediately gravitated toward the M2010, running his hand along its stock with the familiarity of someone who had used similar weapons extensively. Several other participants followed his lead, selecting weapons that matched their previous experience and training. Maria watched the selection process carefully, noting how each soldier's choice reflected their background and confidence level. She approached the weapons table with measured steps, her eyes scanning the available options. Her hands moved to a rifle that several others had passed over, a weapon that looked almost understated compared to some of the more impressive-looking platforms. It was an older design, but Maria recognized the craftsmanship and engineering that had gone into its development. "Interesting choice," said Corporal Mike Chun, a Marine sniper who had been watching her selection process. His tone wasn't mocking, but there was curiosity in his voice. "That's not exactly the latest and greatest." Maria lifted the rifle, checking its balance and sighting down the barrel. "Sometimes the latest isn't the greatest," she replied quietly. "This platform has been putting rounds on target for decades. I trust proven performance over flashy features." Chin nodded thoughtfully, and Maria sensed that she had earned a small measure of respect with her practical approach. But she also noticed that Morrison and several others were watching her with expressions that suggested they weren't entirely convinced by her choice. The first phase of training focused on basic marksmanship principles, starting with dry fire exercises and moving to live fire confirmation of zero. Maria had always excelled at the fundamentals, understanding that spectacular long-range shots were built on a foundation of perfect basic technique. She approached each drill methodically, focusing on consistency rather than trying to impress anyone with flashy shooting. As the morning progressed, it became clear that the participants represented a wide range of shooting philosophies. Some relied heavily on technology and advanced optics, while others preferred simpler setups that required more shooter skill. Maria fell into the latter category, believing that a marksman should be capable of making difficult shots even when equipment failed or conditions weren't ideal. During the first live fire exercise, each soldier was required to engage targets at various distances using their selected weapon system. The targets started at relatively close range, 200 meters, and extended out to 600 meters. For experienced marksmen, these distances shouldn't present significant challenges, but Rodriguez was clearly using the exercise to establish baseline capabilities. Maria settled into her shooting position with practiced ease, her body forming the stable platform necessary for precision shooting. She controlled her breathing, found her natural respiratory pause, and began engaging targets with steady, methodical precision. Each shot was carefully planned and executed, with no wasted movement or hurried follow-up shots. Her first target, a standard silhouette at 200 meters, took a clean hit center mass. The second target, positioned at 300 meters, received a precise headshot. Maria continued working through the course of fire, maintaining consistent accuracy as the ranges increased. By the time she reached the 600-meter targets, she had established a clear pattern of exceptional precision. Morrison, shooting from a position 2 lanes to her left, was also performing well. His shots were accurate, and his technique showed the polish that came from extensive training and combat experience. But Maria noticed that he was taking longer between shots, relying more on his advanced optics, and taking extra time to ensure each round was perfect. When the first exercise concluded, Rodriguez walked the firing line to examine targets and assess performance. He moved methodically from position to position, making notes on his clipboard and occasionally offering brief comments to individual shooters. His expression remained neutral throughout the evaluation process, giving no indication of who was meeting expectations and who might be falling short. At Maria's position, Rodriguez spent more time than usual examining her target. He checked the grouping of her shots, measured distances between impact points, and made several notes on his evaluation sheet. When he finally looked up, his expression was unreadable. "Consistent performance," he said simply before moving on to the next position. For Rodriguez, Maria was learning that constituted high praise. As the group gathered for lunch, conversations naturally formed around shared experiences and mutual interests. Maria found herself somewhat apart from the main group, not because she was unfriendly, but because she had learned that inserting herself too aggressively into male-dominated groups often backfired. Instead, she focused on observing the dynamics and personalities of her fellow participants. Chin approached her as she was cleaning her rifle, a routine she performed religiously after any live fire exercise. "You shot well this morning," he said, settling down nearby with his own weapon. "That grouping at 600 was impressive, especially with iron sights." Maria looked up from her cleaning routine. Thank you. I noticed you were shooting well, too. That wind call on your last target was spot on. She had indeed noticed Chin's ability to read environmental conditions, a skill that separated good marksmen from great ones. Their conversation was interrupted by Morrison's voice carrying across the eating area. I'm just saying, he was telling a small group, when you're in a real combat situation, you need every technological advantage you can get. These old-school approaches might work on a range, but they'll get you killed downrange. The comment wasn't directed at Maria specifically, but she sensed it was intended for her to hear. She continued cleaning her rifle, maintaining the steady rhythm that helped her stay calm when faced with indirect challenges to her competence. Technology is a tool, Chen said, raising his voice slightly so Morrison could hear. But the fundamentals never change. A good shooter can adapt to any weapon system, but all the technology in the world won't help someone who can't read wind or doesn't understand ballistics. Morrison turned toward them, his expression showing mild irritation. Easy to say when you're shooting on a known distance range with perfect conditions. Wait until you try and make a shot at 900 meters with unknown wind and a target that won't hold still. Maria finally looked up from her rifle. How many 900-meter combat shots have you actually taken? She asked quietly. The question wasn't confrontational, but it carried weight. Morrison's expression hardened. Enough to know what I'm talking about. How about you? Enough to know that arguing about it here won't prove anything, Maria replied, returning her attention to her weapon. I guess we'll see what happens when the distances get longer. The afternoon session focused on environmental factors that affected long-range shooting. Rodriguez led the group through detailed instruction on reading wind patterns, understanding atmospheric conditions, and calculating the various factors that could influence bullet trajectory over extended distances. Maria absorbed every detail, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated her deep understanding of ballistic principles. The instructor presented complex scenarios that required participants to calculate solutions for shots under various conditions. Maria's mathematical background served her well, allowing her to quickly work through calculations that some others struggled with. She noticed Rodriguez making additional notes when she provided correct answers to particularly challenging problems. As the day's training concluded, participants began the routine of cleaning equipment and preparing for the next day's challenges. Maria was methodically disassembling her rifle when Rodriguez approached her position. Santos, he said, his tone neutral but carrying authority. I've reviewed your file, but I want to hear from you directly. What's your background with precision shooting? Maria looked up from her rifle, meeting his steady gaze. I started shooting competitively in high school, sir. Joined the military as a marksman, trained with various units during my deployments. I've taken advanced courses whenever they were available, and I've logged significant trigger time in training and combat situations. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Your file mentions some specific engagements. Tell me about your longest confirmed combat shot. The question brought back vivid memories of her second deployment to Afghanistan. Maria paused for a moment, not from uncertainty, but from the weight of recalling that particular day. 1,047 meters, sir. Taliban sniper threatening a convoy evacuation. Single shot, confirmed by multiple observers. The conversation had been quiet, but Maria realized that several other participants had been listening. Morrison's expression showed surprise, and she saw Chin nodding with obvious respect. Rodriguez made a note on his clipboard. What weapon system? Rodriguez asked. M24, sir. Standard issue at the time. Iron sights with a backup scope that had taken some damage earlier in the mission. Rodriguez's expression didn't change, but Maria caught a slight nod of acknowledgement. That's solid work, Santos. Keep showing me that level of performance. As Rodriguez walked away, Maria returned to cleaning her rifle, but she was aware of the changed atmosphere around her. The casual dismissal she had sensed earlier was being replaced by something closer to professional curiosity. Morrison hadn't said anything, but his body language suggested he was reassessing his initial assumptions. The first day of training concluded with an administrative briefing about the upcoming weeks. Rodriguez outlined the progression of challenges, starting with fundamental marksmanship and building toward complex scenarios that would test every aspect of their abilities. The final phase would involve unknown distance targets in field conditions that simulated real combat situations. "Gentlemen," Rodriguez said, then paused and corrected himself with a glance toward Maria. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're here because you've already proven yourselves capable. But this course is designed to separate the good from the exceptional. Some of you will exceed your own expectations. Others will discover that their previous standards weren't high enough." As the group dispersed, Maria gathered her gear and prepared for the evening routine of equipment maintenance and mental preparation. She had learned early in her military career that success in demanding situations required consistent attention to detail, both in physical preparation and mental readiness. Chen fell in a step beside her as they walked toward the barracks. "That was an impressive engagement you mentioned," he said. 1,000-meter-plus shot with iron sights under combat conditions? That's the kind of shooting that gets remembered. Maria shrugged slightly. It was what the situation required. Sometimes you don't get ideal conditions, so you work with what you have. "Still," Chun continued, "Morrison looked like someone had slapped him when you mentioned that distance. I think you've got his attention now." They reached the barracks, and Maria paused before heading to her quarters. "I'm not here to impress anyone or prove anything to skeptics," she said. "I'm here to get better at my job. If that changes some people's opinions along the way, fine. If not, that's fine too." But as she settled into her evening routine, Maria knew that earning respect was more complicated than simply demonstrating competence. She had spent years navigating military culture as one of the few women in specialized roles, and she understood that each interaction was potentially being evaluated through multiple lenses. Her rifle cleaning was interrupted by a knock on her door. When she opened it, she found Rodriguez standing in the hallway with a serious expression. "Santos, I need to discuss something with you," he said. "May I come in?" Maria stepped aside to allow him entry, wondering what issue might require a private conversation at the end of the first day. "I've been instructing this course for 3 years," Rodriguez began, "and I've learned to recognize certain patterns in how participants interact with each other. I want you to understand that your performance today was exceptional, both in shooting and in how you handled some of the social dynamics." Maria wasn't sure how to respond, so she remained silent and listened. "Some of the participants are going to challenge you in ways that have nothing to do with marksmanship," Rodriguez continued. "They're going to test whether you can maintain your performance under pressure, and some of that pressure is going to be unfair. I want to know if you're prepared for that." The question was direct, and Maria appreciated that Rodriguez was addressing the issue openly rather than pretending it didn't exist. "Sir, I've been dealing with those dynamics for my entire career. I understand that some people need to see more proof from me than they require from others. I'm prepared to provide that proof." Rodriguez nodded. "Good, because the challenges are going to get significantly harder from here, and I need every participant focused on the mission rather than on peripheral issues." After Rodriguez left, Maria returned to her rifle maintenance with renewed focus. She understood that tomorrow would bring new tests, both of her shooting ability and her capacity to perform under the additional scrutiny that seemed to follow her wherever she went. The evening passed quietly as participants prepared for the next day's training. Maria reviewed her notes from the day's instruction, studied weather forecasts that might affect tomorrow's shooting conditions, and mentally rehearsed the fundamentals that would be tested in increasingly challenging scenarios. As she settled into her bunk, Maria reflected on the day's events. She had established herself as a competent shooter, but she knew that first impressions in military settings were often temporary. Real respect came from consistent performance over time, especially when conditions became difficult. Tomorrow would bring longer-range targets and more complex environmental factors. Maria was confident in her abilities, but she also understood that confidence needed to be backed up by continued excellence. The skeptical glances she had received today would intensify if she showed any weakness or inconsistency in the days ahead. The barracks grew quiet as soldiers settled into their evening routines. Maria closed her eyes and began the mental preparation that had become her pre-mission ritual over years of military service. She visualized successful shots, perfect technique, and the kind of steady performance that would continue building the professional reputation she had worked so hard to establish. Sleep came easily, as it always did when she knew she was prepared for the challenges ahead. Dawn broke gray and windy over Fort Bragg, conditions that would test every marksman's ability to read environmental factors. Maria had been awake for an hour before reveille, using the quiet time to study weather data and prepare mentally for what she knew would be a more challenging day than the first. The wind was gusting from the southwest at 12 to 15 miles per hour, with occasional stronger gusts that would require careful timing and adjustment. Temperature was dropping throughout the morning, which would affect bullet trajectory in subtle but measurable ways. Maria had learned long ago that successful long-range shooting depended as much on understanding these environmental factors as it did on perfect marksmanship fundamentals. Rodriguez appeared at the company formation looking particularly serious. His weather-beaten face showed no emotion as he surveyed the assembled marksmen, but Maria could tell from his posture that today's training would be more demanding than yesterday's introduction. Today we move to intermediate and long-range precision shooting, Rodriguez announced to the group. Distances will range from 400 to 1,000 meters. You'll be shooting in field conditions with environmental factors that require constant adjustment and adaptation. The instructor gestured toward the range complex, where targets were barely visible even through binoculars. Each shooting position will present different challenges. Wind patterns change across the range due to terrain features. Temperature variations will affect your ballistic calculations. Most importantly, you'll be shooting without the luxury of unlimited time to set up each shot. Maria felt a familiar surge of anticipation that came before challenging shooting. This was where her extensive training and combat experience would be tested against some of the military's finest marksmen. She checked her gear one final time, ensuring everything was secure and easily accessible. Morrison was standing nearby, examining his rifle's advanced optic system. His M2010 was equipped with the latest ballistic computer and environmental sensors, technology that could provide real-time solutions for complex shooting problems. Maria noticed he was spending considerable time programming various settings and checking electronic readings. A lot of variables to account for today, Morrison said, loud enough for several people to hear. Good thing some of us came prepared with the right equipment for the job. The comment was clearly directed at Maria's more traditional rifle setup, and several other participants glanced in her direction to gauge her reaction. Maria continued her equipment check without responding, but Chin stepped forward with a slight smile. Equipment's only as good as the shooter behind it, Chin said mildly. I've seen plenty of people miss with expensive gear, and others hit targets with basic setups. Morrison's expression hardened slightly. We'll see about that when the distances get serious. The group moved to the first firing point, a position that offered shots at targets ranging from 400 to 800 meters. The terrain included hills, valleys, and vegetation that would create complex wind patterns. Rodriguez explained that each shooter would engage multiple targets in sequence, with time limits that prevented extensive deliberation over each shot. Maria studied the range carefully, noting landmarks and terrain features that would help her read wind patterns. She observed trees and vegetation at various points, watching how they moved in the shifting breeze. Years of field experience had taught her to gather this kind of environmental intelligence quickly and continuously. The first shooter took position and began engaging targets. Maria watched carefully, noting not just the results, but how environmental factors affected each shot. She saw bullets drift left on shots toward valley targets and right on shots toward higher elevation positions. The wind was clearly more complex than it appeared from the firing line. When her turn came, Maria settled into position with practiced efficiency. She had chosen a shooting spot that provided good stability and a clear view of all assigned targets. Her first target was at 400 meters, positioned on a small rise that would be affected by the main wind pattern. She took a moment to observe the wind indicators between her position and the target. Grass was bending consistently to the northeast, suggesting a steady crosswind that would require about 2 minutes of angle correction at that distance. Maria made her adjustment and settled into her shooting position. The first shot felt perfect from a moment she pressed the trigger. Her follow-through was smooth, and she maintained her sight picture long enough to see the bullet impact exactly where she had aimed. The target showed a clean hit in the center scoring ring. Her second target was at 600 meters in the valley, where she had observed different wind patterns during other shooters' attempts. The lower elevation seemed to create a wind shadow that reduced the crosswind effect. Maria adjusted accordingly, reducing her windage correction for this target. Again, the shot felt right from the beginning. The bullet impacted slightly higher than her point of aim due to the downward angle, but well within the target's scoring area. Maria was developing confidence in her ability to read this range's environmental conditions. The third target presented the greatest challenge. 800 meters on the opposite hillside, where multiple wind patterns converged. She had watched previous shooters struggle with this target, seeing impacts scattered around the scoring area as they failed to correctly account for the complex environmental factors. Maria spent extra time observing wind indicators at various points between her position and the target. She noticed that vegetation movement suggested 3 distinct wind patterns. The primary southwest wind near her position, a calmer area in the middle distance, and a different wind direction near the target due to terrain effects. For the shot, she would need to aim for the gap between wind zones, timing her shot for a moment when the patterns were most predictable. Maria settled into position and waited for the right moment, controlling her breathing and maintaining perfect sight alignment. The shot broke cleanly during her natural respiratory pause, and Maria maintained her position to observe the bullet's flight. The impact was slightly left of center, but well within the target's high-scoring area. More importantly, she had successfully navigated the complex environmental challenges that had defeated several other shooters. Rodriguez approached her position as she was preparing to move to the next firing point. His expression remained neutral, but Maria noticed he spent extra time examining her targets through binoculars. "Good environmental reading, Santos," he said quietly. "That 800-meter target has been giving people problems all morning. How did you call that wind?" Maria looked back toward the distant target, gathering her thoughts before responding. "3 separate wind patterns, sir. Primary wind here, different pattern near the target, with a transition zone in between. I timed the shot for when the transition was most predictable." Rodriguez nodded and made notes on his clipboard. "That's exactly right. Most people are trying to apply one wind solution across the entire distance, which doesn't work with this terrain." As Rodriguez moved on to evaluate other shooters, Maria noticed that Morrison and several others had been listening to the conversation. Morrison's expression suggested he was reassessing his earlier assumptions about her capabilities. The second firing position offered even greater challenges, with targets at distances ranging from 600 to 1,000 meters. The wind had increased throughout the morning, and temperature changes were beginning to affect bullet trajectories in measurable ways. Maria could see that several participants were struggling with the changing conditions. Morrison took his turn at this position, relying heavily on his ballistic computer to provide environmental solutions. His first 2 shots were accurate, showing the effectiveness of his advanced equipment. But his third shot at the 1,000-meter target missed low and left despite his technological aids. "Equipment malfunction," Morrison muttered as he examined his ballistic computer. Several people nearby heard the comment, and Maria sensed frustration in his voice. When Maria's turn came, she faced the same targets that had challenged Morrison. The 1,000-meter shot would be particularly demanding, requiring perfect technique and accurate environmental reading. She had successfully engaged targets at this distance in combat, but range conditions were different from field situations. Her first shot, at 600 meters, hit center mass with authority. The second target, at 800 meters, required careful wind reading due to changed conditions since the morning session. Maria observed environmental indicators for several seconds before making her adjustment and taking the shot. Another clean hit in the center scoring area. The 1,000-meter target represented the ultimate test of her abilities under these conditions. Maria knew that any small error in technique, environmental reading, or equipment would be magnified over this distance. She spent extra time preparing for this shot, checking every detail of her setup and environmental assessment. She observed wind patterns across the entire distance to the target, noting how vegetation movement indicated changing conditions at various points. The main wind pattern was more consistent than it had been earlier, but there were still variations that required careful consideration. Maria settled into her shooting position and began her final preparation sequence. Her breathing was controlled, her position was stable, and her sight picture was perfect. She waited for a moment when all environmental factors aligned with her calculated solution. The shot felt perfect from the instant she pressed the trigger. Her follow-through was flawless, maintaining sight alignment and trigger control throughout the recoil cycle. Maria held her position and watched through her scope as the bullet impacted exactly where she had aimed. The impact was visible even at that distance, a clean hit in the center of the target's highest scoring area. The shot had been witnessed by the entire group, and Maria heard several quiet expressions of approval from fellow participants. Chun approached her position as she was preparing to clear the range. "That was exceptional shooting," he said with obvious respect. 1,000 meters in these wind conditions with iron sights? That's the kind of shot that gets talked about for years. Maria secured her rifle and began gathering her equipment. It felt right from the beginning. Sometimes everything just comes together perfectly. But she knew the shot had been more than luck or perfect conditions. It represented years of training, extensive combat experience, and countless hours spent developing the skills necessary for precision shooting under challenging circumstances. Rodriguez called the group together for an afternoon briefing on advanced ballistics and environmental factors. His presentation covered complex topics that separated competent marksmen from true precision shooters. Understanding atmospheric pressure effects, temperature variations throughout the day, and the subtle factors that could affect bullet trajectory over extended distances. During the technical discussion, Maria found herself answering several of Rodriguez's questions with detailed explanations that demonstrated her deep understanding of ballistic principles. She noticed that her fellow participants were paying closer attention to her responses, and the skeptical glances from the first day had been replaced by expressions of professional interest. Environmental conditions are constantly changing, Rodriguez explained to the group. A solution that works perfectly in the morning might be completely wrong by afternoon. The best marksmen develop an intuitive understanding of these changes and adjust accordingly. Morrison raised his hand. What about relying on ballistic computers and environmental sensors? Shouldn't technology eliminate most of the guesswork? Rodriguez's expression suggested he had been expecting this question. Technology is a valuable tool, but it has limitations. Sensors can malfunction, batteries die, and computers can provide incorrect solutions if their data inputs are wrong. The most reliable system is a well-trained marksman who understands the fundamentals and can adapt to any situation. The instructor's gaze moved to Maria. "Santos, you've been shooting with minimal electronic aids. How do you account for environmental factors without computer assistance?" Maria had been expecting this question since the morning's shooting demonstrated her capabilities without high-tech equipment. "Sir, I rely on observation and experience. Wind indicators, temperature changes, atmospheric pressure variations. They're all visible if you know what to look for. I use basic calculations and adjust based on what I observe." "Give me an example," Rodriguez said. Maria thought for a moment. This morning's 1,000-meter shot required accounting for a 10-degree temperature drop since dawn, 15-mile-per-hour crosswind with variations, and atmospheric pressure changes due to weather front movement. I observed vegetation movement at multiple distances, felt temperature changes on my skin, and noticed cloud patterns that indicated pressure variations. Her explanation was delivered matter-of-factly, but Maria noticed that Morrison and several others were listening with obvious interest. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, simply explaining her approach to complex environmental factors. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of environmental awareness that separates good shooters from exceptional ones. Technology should support that awareness, not replace it. The afternoon session moved to unknown distance targets, where participants would engage targets without being told the exact ranges. This exercise tested their ability to estimate distances accurately and make appropriate ballistic adjustments based on visual assessment alone. Maria approached unknown distance shooting with confidence built on years of field experience. Combat situations rarely provided the luxury of known distances, so she had developed reliable techniques for range estimation under various conditions. The first target appeared to be approximately 700 meters away, positioned on a hillside with distinctive terrain features that helped confirm her distance estimate. Maria made her ballistic calculations and environmental adjustments, then engaged the target with a clean center hit. The second target was more challenging, positioned in terrain that made distance estimation more difficult. Maria used multiple reference points and range estimation techniques before settling on 850 meters as her best estimate. Her shot impacted slightly high, suggesting the target was closer than her estimate, but still within the scoring area. Morrison was shooting from the position next to hers, and she could hear him struggling with his range estimation. His ballistic computer required accurate distance input to provide correct solutions, but without knowing the exact range, his technological advantage was diminished. "This is ridiculous," Morrison muttered after missing his second target. "How are we supposed to make precision shots without accurate range information?" Maria continued focusing on her own shooting, but she was aware that Morrison's frustration was growing. His reliance on technology was proving to be a disadvantage when that technology required inputs he couldn't provide accurately. The final target of the day was positioned at what Maria estimated to be just over 900 meters, but terrain features made the distance particularly difficult to judge. She spent extra time studying the target and its surroundings, using multiple range estimation techniques to verify her assessment. Her shot placement was perfect, impacting dead center despite the challenging distance and environmental conditions. The accuracy impressed not only her fellow participants, but also Rodriguez, who had been observing the unknown distance exercise closely. As the day's training concluded, participants gathered their equipment and prepared for evening maintenance routines. The atmosphere had changed noticeably since morning, with conversations that now included Maria as a respected peer rather than an unknown quantity. Chin approached her as they walked back toward the barracks. That unknown distance shooting was impressive. 900 meters without a rangefinder in these wind conditions? How do you estimate distances so accurately? Maria considered her response carefully. Practice and experience mostly. I've been shooting in field conditions for years, and you develop an eye for distance after a while. Plus, I use multiple estimation techniques and cross-check them against each other. What kind of techniques? Chun asked with genuine curiosity. Mill relation formulas, terrain association, subtension methods, basically any system that helps confirm what my eyes are telling me, Maria explained. The key is using multiple methods and looking for consistency between them. Morrison had been walking behind them and apparently listening to the conversation. Sounds like a lot of guesswork when you could just use a laser rangefinder. Maria turned slightly to address him directly. Rangefinders are great when they work and when you have time to use them, but they can fail, batteries die, and sometimes tactical situations don't allow for electronic emissions. It's good to have backup skills. Morrison's expression suggested he was considering her point, but he didn't respond immediately. Maria sensed that his confidence in technology-dependent approaches had been shaken by the day's challenges. Rodriguez caught up with the group as they neared the barracks. "Santos, I want to speak with you about tomorrow's exercise. The rest of you, get your equipment cleaned and be ready for the morning briefing at 0600. As the others dispersed, Rodriguez gestured for Maria to walk with him toward the administration building. His expression was serious, but not concerned, suggesting he wanted to discuss something important rather than address a problem. Your performance today was exceptional, Rodriguez began, both in technical shooting ability and in how you handled the environmental challenges. I've been running this course for 3 years, and I rarely see that level of consistent precision under these conditions. Maria wasn't sure how to respond to the praise, so she simply said, "Thank you, sir. I appreciate the feedback. Tomorrow we move to the most challenging phase of the course," Rodriguez continued. Urban precision shooting scenarios, moving targets, and time-critical engagements. These exercises are designed to simulate the most demanding situations you might encounter in the field. They had reached the administration building, and Rodriguez paused before continuing. "I want you to understand that tomorrow's scenarios will test more than just your shooting ability. They'll test your decision-making under pressure, your ability to adapt to changing situations, and your capacity to perform when failure could have serious consequences." The warning was clear, and Maria understood that Rodriguez was preparing her for challenges that would go beyond anything she had faced during the first 2 days of training. "Sir, I understand. I'm ready for whatever scenarios you've designed." Rodriguez studied her face for a moment, as if evaluating her confidence level. "Good, because tomorrow's exercises have eliminated more than half the participants in previous courses. The scenarios are designed to find the limits of even exceptional marksmen." As Maria walked back to her quarters, she reflected on the day's events and Rodriguez's warning about tomorrow's challenges. She had performed well under increasingly difficult conditions, but she knew that urban shooting scenarios would present entirely different types of problems. The evening maintenance routine provided familiar comfort as Maria cleaned her rifle and prepared her equipment for the next day's training. She reviewed her notes from the day's instruction, studied the weather forecast for tomorrow, and mentally prepared for scenarios that would test every aspect of her marksmanship training. Before settling into her bunk, Maria spent time visualizing successful performance under various urban shooting challenges. She had extensive experience with precision shooting in urban environments during her combat deployments, but training scenarios often presented unique problems that required quick adaptation. Sleep came easily, despite her anticipation for tomorrow's challenges. Maria had learned that worry was counterproductive when facing demanding situations, and her confidence was built on solid preparation and proven performance under pressure. The barracks grew quiet as participants settled into their evening routines, each preparing in their own way for what everyone understood would be the most challenging day of training yet. Maria closed her eyes and began the mental preparation ritual that had become second nature over years of military service. The third day began before sunrise with an emergency assembly that caught everyone off guard. Maria had just finished her morning preparation routine when Rodriguez's voice echoed through the barracks, calling all participants to immediate formation outside. The urgency in his voice suggested that today's training would be different from the structured exercises of the previous days. Outside, the pre-dawn darkness was broken only by tactical lighting that cast harsh shadows across the assembly area. Rodriguez stood before the group wearing full combat gear instead of his usual training uniform, and Maria noticed several other instructors positioned around the perimeter, also in tactical equipment. "Gentlemen and lady," Rodriguez began, his voice carrying the authority of a combat veteran addressing troops before a mission. "Today's scenarios will simulate real-world urban precision shooting situations. You'll face time-critical decisions, moving targets, and environmental challenges that mirror actual combat conditions." The instructor gestured toward a complex of buildings that had been invisible in the darkness when they first assembled. As Maria's eyes adjusted, she could make out a detailed urban training facility complete with multi-story structures, narrow alleys, and rooftop positions that would provide various shooting platforms. "Each scenario will test different aspects of urban marksmanship," Rodriguez continued. Target identification, range estimation in complex terrain, shooting around obstacles, and engagement of threats while avoiding civilian targets. Failure in these scenarios has consequences beyond missing targets. Maria felt her heart rate increase slightly, the natural response to understanding that today's training would push her capabilities to their absolute limits. She had extensive urban combat experience, but training scenarios often presented challenges that were different from actual deployments. Morrison stood nearby, checking his equipment with movements that seemed less confident than during the previous days. The structured range exercises had played to his technological advantages, but urban scenarios would require rapid adaptation and decision-making that couldn't rely entirely on computer assistance. Rodriguez divided the participants into pairs for the first scenario, and Maria found herself partnered with Chun. The pairing seemed natural given their mutual respect and compatible approaches to precision shooting, but Maria understood that working as a team would add complexity to an already challenging situation. Your first scenario involves engaging threats from an elevated position while avoiding civilian targets, Rodriguez explained as he led Maria and Chun toward a 3-story building. The targets will appear at various ranges and positions throughout the urban complex. Some targets will be clearly hostile, others will be civilians that must not be engaged. They climbed to the building's roof, where a shooting position had been prepared with sandbags and equipment. The elevated position provided an excellent view of the urban training complex, but Maria immediately recognized the challenges they would face. Multiple buildings, narrow sight lines, and complex backgrounds would make target identification and engagement significantly more difficult than open-range shooting. Chin settled into the primary shooting position, while Maria took the role of spotter and backup shooter. They had quickly established this arrangement based on their compatible shooting abilities and Chin's experience with spotter duties during his Marine training. First target will appear in 30 seconds, Rodriguez announced through their radio. Remember, positive identification is required before engagement. Civilian casualties result in automatic failure. Maria scanned the complex through binoculars, looking for movement or any indication of where targets might appear. The urban environment created multiple potential shooting positions and cover locations that would require constant observation and rapid decision-making. A figure appeared in a second-story window approximately 400 meters away. Through her binoculars, Maria could see an individual in military clothing carrying what appeared to be a rifle. The target was clearly hostile and presented an immediate threat to their simulated position. Confirmed hostile, second floor, center building, Maria called to Chun. 400 meters, holding rifle, clear engagement. Chun quickly acquired the target through his scope and took the shot within seconds of Maria's identification. The impact was perfect, and the target disappeared from the window. Their first engagement had been textbook execution of urban precision shooting protocols. Over the next 20 minutes, they successfully engaged 6 additional hostile targets while correctly identifying and avoiding 3 civilian targets that had appeared in similar positions. Their teamwork was seamless, with Maria providing rapid target identification and range estimation while Chun delivered precise shots under time pressure. The scenario concluded with a complex engagement that required simultaneous assessment of multiple potential targets. 3 figures appeared at different locations within seconds of each other, forcing Maria and Chun to rapidly determine which were hostile threats and which were civilians. Multiple targets, Maria announced, scanning quickly between the 3 positions. Left position appears civilian, no weapon visible. Center position hostile, armed with rifle. Right position. She paused for a crucial second, studying the figure through her binoculars. Right position civilian, appears to be carrying child. Chun engaged the center target with a perfect shot while avoiding the civilian positions. The scenario ended with confirmation that they had correctly identified all targets and engaged only the hostile threat. Rodriguez appeared at their position as they were securing their equipment. His expression was unreadable, but Maria noticed he was making extensive notes on his evaluation sheet. "Good target discrimination under pressure," he said simply. "Clean engagement of hostile targets, no civilian casualties, and efficient team coordination." As they moved to observe other participants attempting the same scenario, Maria was disturbed by what she witnessed. Morrison and his partner had engaged one civilian target, mistaking a maintenance worker for a hostile threat. The error would have been catastrophic in a real situation, and Morrison's frustration was obvious as Rodriguez debriefed their performance. "This is impossible," Morrison said loudly enough for others to hear. "The targets appear and disappear too quickly for proper identification. In a real situation, we'd have better intelligence and more time to assess threats." Rodriguez's response was immediate and firm. "In a real situation, you get the time you have, not the time you want." Urban precision shooting requires rapid decision-making based on limited information. That's why we train these scenarios. The second exercise moved to ground-level positions, where participants would engage targets while moving through urban terrain. This scenario tested their ability to quickly establish shooting positions, engage targets accurately, and continue movement while maintaining situational awareness. Maria approached this exercise with confidence built on extensive urban combat experience from her deployments. She understood how to move efficiently through complex terrain while staying ready to engage targets that might appear at any moment. The scenario began with Maria positioned at one end of a street that ran between multi-story buildings. Her objective was to advance toward a specific building while engaging hostile targets and avoiding civilian areas. The exercise would test her ability to shoot accurately while under the stress of movement and time pressure. She began advancing using proper urban movement techniques, staying close to walls, and using available cover while scanning for potential targets. Her rifle was ready for immediate engagement, but she maintained finger discipline and proper muzzle awareness throughout her movement. The first target appeared in a second-story window as she was crossing an open area. Maria immediately took cover behind a concrete barrier and acquired the target through her scope. The range was approximately 300 meters, requiring quick assessment of environmental factors and ballistic adjustments. The shot was clean and accurate, dropping the target before it could engage her position. Maria immediately continued her advance, knowing that remaining stationary would make her vulnerable to additional threats. A second target appeared at ground level, partially concealed behind a vehicle. This engagement required careful aim to avoid hitting the vehicle while accurately engaging the threat. Maria's shot was precise, hitting the target without causing collateral damage. As she neared her objective, two targets appeared simultaneously at different elevations and ranges. This was the most challenging part of the scenario, requiring rapid engagement of multiple threats while maintaining accuracy under extreme time pressure. Maria engaged the closer target first, achieving a clean hit before quickly transitioning to the second target at longer range. Her second shot was equally accurate, completing the scenario with perfect target engagement and no civilian casualties. Rodriguez was waiting at her final position when she arrived. His expression showed approval, and Maria noticed he was making positive notes on his evaluation sheet. "Excellent movement and shooting," he said. "Clean target engagement under pressure, proper use of cover, and good tactical movement throughout the scenario." The afternoon brought the most challenging exercise yet: precision shooting from unconventional positions under simulated combat stress. Participants would engage targets while in physical stress positions, under time pressure, and with simulated equipment failures that required rapid adaptation. Maria found herself lying prone on a narrow ledge approximately 30 feet above ground level, simulating a sniper position on a building's edge. The position was inherently unstable, requiring her to maintain perfect shooting form while dealing with fear of falling and physical discomfort. Her target was positioned 800 meters away in a window that was partially obscured by structural elements. The shot would require threading the bullet through a narrow opening while compensating for wind and the unstable shooting position. To add complexity, Rodriguez had instructed her to simulate an equipment failure by removing her primary optic and shooting with backup iron sights only. This constraint eliminated any technological advantages and forced her to rely entirely on fundamental marksmanship skills. Maria studied the target and shooting conditions carefully. The wind was gusty and variable, the shooting position was uncomfortable and unstable, and the target opening was barely large enough to allow for margin of error. This shot would require every skill she had developed over years of precision shooting. She established the most stable position possible on the narrow ledge, using every available contact point to create a steady shooting platform. Her breathing was controlled despite the physical stress, and her sight alignment was perfect despite the challenging position. The shot felt right from the moment she pressed the trigger. Her follow-through was flawless despite the unstable platform, and she maintained her sight picture long enough to confirm the bullet's impact. The target fell cleanly, indicating a perfect hit through the narrow opening. Rodriguez climbed to her position as she was preparing to descend. His expression showed genuine surprise, and Maria realized that this shot had exceeded even his expectations for the scenario. "That was exceptional shooting under extremely challenging conditions," he said. 800 meters with iron sights from an unstable position, through a narrow opening, in variable wind conditions. That's the kind of shot that defines elite marksmanship. As the day's training concluded, participants gathered for a comprehensive debrief of their performance in the urban scenarios. Rodriguez's evaluation was thorough and honest, highlighting both successful performances and areas where improvement was needed. "Urban precision shooting is the most demanding form of marksmanship," Rodriguez told the group. "It requires not just shooting ability, but rapid decision-making, target discrimination, and the ability to perform under extreme stress. Some of you excelled in these challenges, others discovered areas that need additional training." Maria noticed that Morrison appeared frustrated and discouraged by his performance during the urban scenarios. His reliance on technology had proven to be a disadvantage when scenarios required rapid adaptation and split-second decision-making. Chin approached Maria as the group was dispersing. "Your shooting today was incredible. That final shot from the ledge was something most people couldn't make under perfect conditions, much less with all the added stress factors." "Thank you," Maria replied. "The conditions were challenging, but that's what makes this training valuable. Real situations are never ideal, so we need to be prepared for difficult circumstances." But Maria knew that her performance today had been more than just good shooting. She had demonstrated the ability to excel under the most demanding conditions the course could present, and she could sense that the respect of her fellow participants was no longer in question. Rodriguez pulled her aside as the group was preparing to leave the training area. "Santos, I need to discuss tomorrow's final exercise with you. Based on your performance over the past 3 days, I'm considering recommending you for advanced specialized training." The comment caught Maria by surprise. Advanced training opportunities were rare and highly competitive, reserved for marksmen who demonstrated exceptional potential for elite assignments. "What kind of specialized training, sir?" she asked. Rodriguez's expression became more serious. "That depends on how you perform in tomorrow's final scenario. It's a comprehensive test that will challenge every skill you've developed. If you continue to perform at the level I've seen this week, there are opportunities available that could significantly advance your career." As Maria walked back to the barracks, she reflected on the day's events and Rodriguez's mention of advanced training opportunities. She had come to this course hoping to improve her skills and earn professional recognition. Now it appeared that exceptional performance might open doors she hadn't even considered. The evening maintenance routine took on additional importance as Maria prepared for what Rodriguez had described as the final and most comprehensive test of the course. She cleaned her equipment with extra care, reviewed her notes from all 3 days of training, and mentally prepared for challenges that would test everything she had learned. Chin joined her in the equipment maintenance area, working on his own rifle while engaging in quiet conversation about the day's scenarios. Their partnership during the urban exercises had been successful, and Maria valued his perspective on the challenges they had faced. Rodriguez seemed particularly impressed with your performance today, Chin observed. That final shot from a ledge was the kind of shooting that gets remembered for years. Maria paused in her equipment cleaning. The shot felt right, but honestly, I was just applying the fundamentals under difficult conditions. That's what all this training has been about, performing consistently regardless of circumstances. Still, Chun continued, there's a difference between textbook technique and actually executing under that kind of pressure. Not everyone can do what you did today. Morrison entered the maintenance area as they were speaking, and Maria sensed tension in his posture. His performance during the urban scenarios had been disappointing, and she could tell he was struggling with frustration and damaged confidence. Santos, Morrison said, his tone more respectful than it had been during the first 2 days. I wanted to apologize for some of the comments I made earlier in the course. Your shooting has been impressive, and I was wrong to question your capabilities. The apology was unexpected, but welcome. Maria understood that admitting error required character, especially for someone with Morrison's background and reputation. I appreciate that, Maria replied. We're all here to improve our skills and learn from each other. Tomorrow's final exercise will challenge all of us. Morrison nodded and began working on his equipment, but the atmosphere in the maintenance area had changed. The competitive tension that had characterized the first days of training was being replaced by mutual respect and shared focus on the final challenges ahead. Rodriguez appeared in the maintenance area as participants were completing their evening equipment preparation. His expression was serious, and Maria could tell he was preparing to deliver important information about tomorrow's final exercise. Tomorrow's scenario will test every skill you've developed during this course, he announced to the group. Long-range precision shooting, environmental adaptation, target discrimination, shooting under stress, and decision-making under pressure. It's a comprehensive evaluation that will determine which of you are ready for advanced assignments. The instructor paused, studying each participant's face. The final exercise has a failure rate of approximately 60%. It's designed to identify marksmen who can perform at the highest levels under the most demanding circumstances. Rodriguez's gaze settled on Maria for a moment before continuing. Those who successfully complete tomorrow's scenario will have demonstrated capabilities that place them among the military's elite marksmen. Those who don't will still have gained valuable training and experience. As Rodriguez departed, the maintenance area fell silent. Each participant understood that tomorrow would determine the ultimate success or failure of their efforts during the advanced marksmanship course. Maria completed her equipment preparation with methodical precision, ensuring that every detail was perfect for tomorrow's challenges. She had performed exceptionally well during the first 3 days, but she understood that the final exercise would present new tests of her capabilities. Before settling into her bunk, Maria spent time mentally rehearsing the skills and techniques that had served her well throughout the course. She visualized successful performance under various challenging scenarios, controlling her breathing and maintaining the confident mindset that had carried her through years of military service. Sleep came slowly as anticipation for tomorrow's final test competed with the fatigue from 3 days of intensive training. Maria understood that her performance tomorrow would determine not just her success in this course, but potentially the direction of her entire military career. The barracks grew quiet as participants settled into their final night of preparation, each dealing with the pressure and expectations of tomorrow's comprehensive evaluation in their own way. Maria closed her eyes and focused on the mental preparation techniques that had never failed to help her perform when the stakes were highest. The final day dawned with an overcast sky that seemed to mirror the tension among the remaining participants. Maria had been awake since before dawn, using the quiet hours to center herself for what she knew would be the most demanding test of her marksmanship career. The weight of expectation was heavy, but she had learned long ago to channel pressure into focused determination. Rodriguez appeared at morning formation wearing the expression of an instructor who was about to present the ultimate challenge. Behind him stood a figure Maria didn't recognize, a tall, graying man in an immaculate uniform whose bearing suggested high rank and considerable authority. The presence of this unknown observer added another layer of significance to the day's events. Today's final exercise will be conducted under observation, Rodriguez announced to the assembled group. General Mitchell has come to personally evaluate the performance of this course's participants. The mention of General Mitchell sent a ripple of recognition through the group. Maria knew the name. Mitchell was a legend in special operations communities, a man whose career had included some of the military's most demanding assignments. His presence suggested that today's results would have implications far beyond course completion. General Mitchell stepped forward, his weathered face showing the kind of confidence that came from decades of military leadership. When he spoke, his voice carried authority that commanded immediate attention. The scenario you'll face today simulates a real-world precision shooting mission that requires every skill taught in this course, the general began. Long-range target engagement, environmental adaptation, time pressure, and decision-making under stress. Your performance will be evaluated not just for technical accuracy, but for your ability to execute under conditions that mirror actual combat operations. The general's gaze moved across the assembled marksmen, pausing briefly on each participant. When his eyes met Maria's, she maintained steady eye contact, projecting the confidence she had built over years of successful military service. The mission scenario involves engaging multiple targets at various ranges while navigating complex terrain and environmental challenges, General Mitchell continued. You'll face unknown distances, variable weather conditions, and time constraints that mirror real-world operational requirements. Rodriguez took over the briefing, outlining the specific parameters of the final exercise. Participants would work individually, engaging targets positioned throughout a large training complex that included open terrain, wooded areas, and urban elements. The exercise would test every skill developed during the course while adding the pressure of comprehensive evaluation. Each participant will begin the exercise at 15-minute intervals, Rodriguez explained. This prevents any advantage from observing other attempts and ensures that each evaluation is independent. Maria was assigned to the third position in the rotation, giving her time to observe the terrain and weather conditions, but not enough to overthink the challenges ahead. She used the waiting time to study environmental factors and mentally prepare for scenarios that would test her limits. Chun was selected to go first, and Maria watched with interest as he prepared for the exercise. His movements showed confidence, but she could see tension in his posture that suggested he was feeling the weight of final evaluation under General Mitchell's observation. Morrison was assigned to go second, and Maria noticed that his equipment selection had changed since the first day. He had added backup iron sights to his technologically advanced rifle system, apparently having learned from the equipment failure scenarios during urban training. As Chun began his exercise, Maria could hear the occasional sound of rifle fire in the distance, but the complex terrain prevented her from observing his actual performance. The waiting was the most difficult part, allowing time for doubt and anxiety to creep into her thoughts despite her years of experience. When Chun returned from his exercise, his expression was unreadable. He offered no details about the challenges he had faced, understanding that each participant needed to approach the scenario independently. But Maria could see satisfaction in his posture that suggested his performance had met his own expectations. Morrison's turn began with confidence, but Maria noticed changes in his demeanor when he returned 40 minutes later. His expression showed frustration, and she sensed that the technological approaches he favored had encountered problems during the exercise. Finally, Rodriguez called Maria's name. "Santos, you're up. Remember, this exercise will test everything you've learned. Trust your training and execute with confidence." General Mitchell approached as she was making final equipment checks. "Sergeant Santos," he said, using a tone that was neither encouraging nor discouraging. I've been reviewing your file and following your performance during this course. Today's exercise will determine whether you're ready for opportunities that could significantly advance your career. The weight of that statement wasn't lost on Maria, but she understood that thinking about potential outcomes would only interfere with her performance. Yes, sir. I'm ready. The exercise began at the edge of a large training complex that included varied terrain and multiple potential shooting positions. Maria was given a tablet containing target locations and engagement parameters, but the information was deliberately limited to simulate real-world mission constraints. Her first objective was a target positioned approximately 600 meters away across open terrain. The environmental conditions had deteriorated since morning, with increasing wind and temperature fluctuations that would require careful assessment and adjustment. Maria studied the terrain carefully, identifying the optimal shooting position and route of approach. She noticed that the direct route would expose her to observation from multiple directions, while a longer approach would provide better concealment, but consume more time. She chose the longer route, prioritizing tactical soundness over speed. The approach took her through a wooded area that provided excellent concealment, but required careful navigation to maintain proper direction toward her shooting position. When she reached her selected firing position, Maria had a clear view of the target area and good natural cover from potential observation. The target was a standard military silhouette positioned to simulate a long-range engagement scenario. She spent several minutes assessing environmental conditions from this position. The wind was gusty and variable, requiring careful observation of vegetation movement at various distances. Temperature had dropped significantly since morning, which would affect bullet trajectory over the extended range. Maria made her calculations and settled into a perfect shooting position. Her first shot felt excellent from the moment she pressed the trigger, and she maintained her sight picture long enough to confirm impact. The target fell cleanly, indicating a successful engagement. Her second objective required movement to a different area of the complex, where she would engage targets at unknown distances under time pressure. This phase of the exercise tested her ability to quickly establish shooting positions and make accurate range estimations under stress. The route to the second objective area took her through terrain that provided multiple potential shooting positions, but also required careful selection to optimize for the engagement scenarios she might face. Maria chose positions that offered stability and concealment while providing clear sight lines to likely target areas. When she reached the designated area, multiple targets were visible at various ranges and positions. Her tabula indicated that she had limited time to engage all targets, adding pressure that simulated real-world mission constraints. Maria quickly assessed the target array, identifying ranges and prioritizing engagements based on threat level and difficulty. Her first target appeared to be at approximately 750 meters, requiring immediate ballistic calculations and environmental adjustments. The shot was clean and accurate, dropping the target with authority. Maria immediately transitioned to her second target, positioned at what she estimated to be 800 meters in more challenging terrain. Her second engagement was equally successful, demonstrating her ability to quickly adapt to changing ranges and conditions. The remaining targets fell in rapid succession as Maria demonstrated the shooting skills and tactical thinking that had earned her recognition throughout the course. The final phase of the exercise presented the ultimate challenge, a precision shot at maximum range under conditions that tested every skill she possessed. The target was positioned over 1,000 meters away in terrain that created complex wind patterns and environmental challenges. Maria approached this engagement with the methodical precision that had characterized her shooting throughout the course. She spent considerable time studying environmental conditions, using every available indicator to assess wind patterns and ballistic factors. The shooting position she selected provided excellent stability, but required her to account for a slight upward angle that would affect bullet trajectory. Her calculations included wind speed and direction at multiple distances temperature effects, atmospheric pressure, and the angular factors of the shot. When she finally settled into her firing position, Maria felt the familiar calm that came with perfect preparation and confidence in her abilities. Her breathing was controlled, her sight picture was perfect, and her trigger control was flawless. The shot felt perfect from the instant she pressed the trigger. Her follow-through was textbook, maintaining sight alignment throughout the recoil cycle while observing the bullet's flight toward the distant target. The impact was visible even at that extreme range, a clean hit that demonstrated precision shooting at the limits of both her equipment and skills. Maria maintained her position for several seconds, absorbing the satisfaction that came with perfect execution under the most demanding circumstances. Rodriguez appeared at her position as she was securing her equipment. His expression showed obvious approval, and she could see that he was making extensive positive notes on his evaluation sheet. "Outstanding performance, Santos," he said with genuine admiration. "That final shot was exceptional, even by the standards of this course. You've demonstrated capabilities that place you among the finest marksmen I've trained." General Mitchell was waiting when Maria returned to the starting point. His expression was unreadable, but Maria sensed approval in his posture and demeanor. "Sergeant Santos," the general said, "I observed significant portions of your exercise. Your performance was exceptional in every measurable category. More importantly, you demonstrated the kind of thinking and adaptability that we look for in our most demanding assignments." Maria wasn't sure how to respond to such direct praise from someone of General Mitchell's reputation and rank. "Thank you, sir. I tried to apply everything I learned during the course." "You did more than apply what you learned," General Mitchell replied. "You demonstrated natural ability combined with exceptional training and experience. That combination is rare." As the final participants completed their exercises, the group gathered for comprehensive evaluation and course conclusion. Rodriguez reviewed overall performance statistics, highlighting the demanding nature of the final exercise and the high standards required for successful completion. This course had 12 participants, Rodriguez announced, for successfully completed all phases of training to standard. Of those 4, 2 demonstrated performance that qualifies them for advanced specialized training opportunities. The instructor's gaze moved to Maria and Chun. "Santos and Chun, your performance throughout this course has been exceptional. You've both demonstrated capabilities that qualify you for opportunities in our most demanding precision shooting programs." General Mitchell stepped forward to address the successful participants personally. When he reached Maria, his expression showed respect and professional appreciation. "Sergeant Santos, I'm recommending you for immediate assignment to the Special Operations Precision Shooting Program," he said formally. "This program supports our most critical missions and requires marksmen who can perform under the most demanding circumstances. Your performance this week has convinced me that you're ready for that level of responsibility." The recommendation was more than Maria had hoped for when she arrived at the course. Special operations assignments were reserved for the military's elite, and the opportunity represented a significant advancement in her career. "Thank you, sir," she managed to say. "I'm honored by the recommendation and ready for whatever challenges the assignment might bring." General Mitchell nodded approvingly. "The assignment comes with extensive additional training and responsibilities that will test everything you've learned. But based on what I've seen this week, I'm confident you'll excel in the program." As the course conclusion ceremony ended, participants gathered their equipment and prepared for departure. The atmosphere was one of mutual respect and professional accomplishment, even among those who hadn't qualified for advanced training. Morrison approached Maria as she was organizing her gear. "Santos, I owe you another apology. When we started this course, I made assumptions based on factors that had nothing to do with shooting ability. Your performance this week has been incredible, and I've learned something about evaluating people based on merit rather than preconceptions." Maria appreciated Morrison's honesty and growth. "We all came here to improve our skills and learn from each other. I think everyone accomplished that, regardless of the final evaluation results. Chun joined their conversation as he finished packing his equipment. Maria, working with you during the urban scenarios was one of the highlights of this course. Your shooting ability is exceptional, but your tactical thinking and team coordination are equally impressive. Rodriguez approached the group as they were concluding their conversation. Santos, I have some additional information about your new assignment. You'll be reporting to Fort Bragg's Special Operations Command next month for advanced training. The program will build on everything you learned here and prepare you for missions that require the highest levels of precision shooting. As Maria prepared to leave Fort Bragg, she reflected on the week's events and their significance for her military career. She had arrived hoping to improve her skills and gain professional recognition. Instead, she had exceeded every expectation and earned opportunities that would challenge her at the highest levels of military service. The drive away from the training facility gave her time to process the magnitude of what had occurred. In 4 days, she had progressed from being an unknown quantity among elite marksmen to earning recommendation for the military's most demanding precision shooting assignments. But Maria understood that this week's success was built on years of dedicated training, extensive combat experience, and unwavering commitment to excellence. The advanced marksmanship course had provided the opportunity to demonstrate capabilities that had been developing throughout her military career. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Rodriguez as she reached the main gate. Santos, General Mitchell asked me to pass along additional information. Your final exercise score was the highest recorded in 3 years of running this course. You've set a new standard. Congratulations, and good luck in your new assignment. The message confirmed what Maria had sensed during her final evaluation, that her performance had exceeded even the instructor's expectations. More importantly, it validated years of training and preparation for exactly these kinds of opportunities. As she drove toward her home base, Maria began mentally preparing for the challenges ahead. Special operations assignments would test every skill she possessed while adding new responsibilities and expectations that would push her capabilities to their absolute limits. But she felt ready for whatever challenges awaited her. The week at Fort Bragg had proven that her shooting abilities were among the finest in the military, and, more importantly, that she could perform under the most demanding circumstances her career might present. The skeptical glances and dismissive comments from the course's first day seemed like ancient history now. Maria had earned the professional respect of her peers and the recognition of senior leadership through exceptional performance when it mattered most. Her reflection was interrupted by another message, this one from General Mitchell himself. Sergeant Santos, welcome to an elite community of warriors who serve in our nation's most critical missions. Your performance this week demonstrated that you belong among the finest marksmen our military has ever produced. I look forward to seeing your continued excellence in service of our country. Maria smiled as she read the message, understanding that her military career had reached a new level of opportunity and responsibility. The road ahead would be challenging, but she had proven to herself and others that she was ready for whatever missions might require her unique combination of shooting ability and tactical expertise. The afternoon sun was setting as she reached her destination, marking the end of a week that had transformed both her career prospects and her confidence in her own capabilities. Maria had always known she was a capable marksman, but the events at Fort Bragg had proven that her abilities placed her among the military's absolute elite. Tomorrow would begin preparation for new challenges and responsibilities that would test her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. But tonight, Maria allowed herself to feel satisfaction with exceptional performance under the most demanding circumstances her career had ever presented. The quiet murmur, black Talon Mark, that General Mitchell had made to Rodriguez during her final evaluation would follow her throughout her military career, a recognition that she had achieved the highest levels of precision shooting excellence and earned her place among an elite community of warriors who serve in the nation's most critical missions.